everyone, I'm Lilah McDonald, a teenage social entrepreneur and founder of Water Us. I'm also host of NZ Business Magazine's podcast, Sustainably Ever After. Proudly brought to you by Office Max, New Zealand's leading workplace and education solutions provider. I'll be exploring the incredible world of sustainability and entrepreneurship. On this podcast, I'll be talking to guests who are making waves in the world of sustainability. Those who have built businesses with a purpose, those striving to make their companies greener, and those leading the charge for social and environmental change. This episode, I will be talking to Garth Ellingham, the founder of LUCKE, a company on a mission to make clothing that doesn't cost the earth.
At Office Max Business Accounts, pay less. Sign up at officemax.co.nz/payless. Let's get it done. T's and C's apply.
Welcome, Garth. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So you used to be a professional sailor. How did you get into that?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but I grew up on the water. All my family holidays were out spent in the Hauraki Gulf, so it's kind of a natural progression that I sort of fell in love with the wind and the water. I grew up near Naranek Beach, which is just down in the North Shore, and I used to drive past a yacht club there called Wakatiri every day, and I remember saying to my parents, when I'm old enough, I want to start sailing there. And then I guess it's just been a lifelong passion. I'm a very competitive person at the same time, and when I was a child, I really wanted to be on the America's Cup after seeing all those Team New Zealand defences here in Auckland. And then, just been chasing that dream until the age of 30 probably.
Wow. So what made you decide to switch from sailing to start a sustainable clothing company?
Yeah, I guess I also went to university and I studied civil engineering and I specialised in environmental. It was always kind of a backup plan for me, but I guess from my upbringing and being always on the water, I grew a real love for the ocean, and I could see that things were changing from when I was growing up. For all of my life, my dream was to sort of be in the America's Cup, and I got to a point in my career probably when I thought I probably wasn't going to get there, which is always a very humbling thing, I think, as a sports person. But it meant that the sort of work I was doing in the sailing space was kind of working for very wealthy people, and I would almost call it being a paid friend, and I'd be racing in these amazing places around the world, sort of teaching them how to get around a course or trying to help them win a race. But I kind of felt that I wasn't really offering much value to the world there. Look, it was a great lifestyle, but I sort of had a moment, actually when I was flying from London to Chicago, where you sort of had some time on an aeroplane contemplating life, and I feel like you're a little bit vulnerable sometimes in the plane when you've got all that time to yourself. But I realised I'd actually studied civil engineering, which specialised in environmental at university, and I'd kind of given up on the environment. I feel like a lot of people have this sort of perception where you're like, what can I do? There's such a big problem out there. But me doing something isn't actually going to have an effect. And I realised that didn't sit well with me, and I sort of I had some injuries and sort of some life situations change, and I sort of realised that didn't sit well. So I was like, well, maybe I can't change the world, but I can, I guess, start with myself and maybe prove to other people that if by me living a lifestyle that, values empathy for the environment and the people, then that might, have an effect on my community, which, you never know where that goes to. And I mean, I guess it's kind of selfish, but it's sort of also made me okay with myself doing that, if that makes sense.
Well, that seems honestly like a really common theme in these interviews, that the person doesn't feel fulfilled and they want to do something, even if it's just a small change, So would you have any advice for people that want to make a change but don't know where to start?
Yeah, I mean, now there's so many great, what you're doing here with podcasting, there's like the assets out there now. There's a lot of people, as you say, sort of on their journey at different parts. I guess for me, I sort of went back to the beginning and I was like, I'll just start with what I can control. And so I'm really big on we need to choose to care. It's one of LUCKE's sort of mantras, but also mine. I think in the world right now, people are becoming more isolated in a way with, technology and things like that. You hear a lot of, mental health problems that are going around. And I think if we can reconnect to the environment and community, I know I'm always my happiest when I'm got out on the water, if you've had a bad day or you're just struggling, going out and reconnecting with people and the environment makes such a massive difference. And so if you kind of start basically there, why wouldn't you want to protect something like that? So if you just start with simple things with, what you choose to buy, what you choose to eat, how you, with your waste, how do you treat that? Unfortunately, a lot of these things require a bit more effort, but once you get into your routine, it actually, it can be quite rewarding. And, I quite enjoy problem solving, so I think a lot of people do actually. So I think that's a great place to start. Once you start with one thing, I think it just sort of snowballs into bigger things, and it kind of opens your eyes up to, I guess, some pretty big problems out there, and that can be daunting. But I think you've got to revert back and not let it overwhelm you, because I think that's also a big problem with this issue, is that there's so many issues out there. It's kind of where do you start? I mean, it kind of sounds cliche, but start small, start with something, and just build from there.
So I guess you decided to start with sustainable clothing. What gave you that idea?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit rogue considering I'm an engineer and a sailor by trade, so they're not a natural fit. I think in a lot of the sailing teams I was involved in, I was always around sort of management roles, and so I had a bit of experience with sorting out team uniforms before, and so I knew some of the, I guess, pain points coming from the customer side of things, where you're dealing with timeframes or different products and things like that, and I guess you've got team members putting pressure on you to deliver on, say, uniform, but then you're having to deal with the producer and marry these things together. So I had a little bit of experience there, and sort of one of the teams I was part of was sponsored by a company that was producing recycled polyester products and uniform, and the guy who was the head of that factory was actually a New Zealander, and he was living in Latvia of all places. So we met just on the tour, and both being Kiwis, naturally shared a love of a few things and spoke about rugby and all those classic Kiwi things. But after speaking to him, I sort of asked him about his business, and I was like, oh, okay, this sounds really interesting to me. I already understood some of the clothing issues, but the fact that there was a sustainable story behind it, I was like, I think that's really powerful. And I was also genuinely interested because I cared, and I was like, hey, would you be okay with me sort of becoming a salesman for your business? And he was like, yeah, that'd be great. So I sort of started there, and then it's for different reasons I sort of decided I'd start my own thing, and that factory is still a supplier to LUCKE now, but I've, I guess, broadened our offering, because there's so many different types of fabrics, and you can't just be stuck with one factory.
So LUCKE's clothing is made from sustainable materials. Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Yeah, I'm always very careful about using the word sustainable. I think there's a lot of marketing out there, and saying, and I think especially overseas, you hear you've got to be very careful these days with greenwashing. So I like to talk about, I guess, sustainably minded or low impact. Every product we ever produce is, I'm not sure if we can say it's truly sustainable. I think it's got sustainability in mind. So the way we look at it is, I'm just trying to have the least amount of impact on the earth as possible. That's sort of my approach to it. So, we look at fabrics such as organic cotton, recycled polyester. They're the two main ones we deal with. Now, neither of those fabrics are a silver bullet for clothing. There's no magic answer, but I think if you dig into them, they're better than the alternatives, and it's a step in the right direction. So I guess my hope is that if we can convert people over to these products, or even start thinking about the fabrics that they buy, that will, increase this movement and will advocate for innovation in the space as well. It creates a market for these sorts of products, whereas at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of our clothing is still, virgin polyester or normal cotton, which uses lots of pesticides, which have a much larger carbon footprint.
So do you use any other materials. I think I read that you use coffee grounds. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's recycled coffee grounds with recycled polyester, so it's like a blend. Now, I think in the space there's a lot of sort of blended fabrics, which again have their issues. I think you spoke to Jeff the other week, and a big problem is, I guess, separating these out, for the end of life situation. But it's a cool story that there's some recycled polyester there, which there is benefits to reusing those products. But the recycled coffee grounds, actually, it's used coffee grounds, so it offers sort of like an odor reducing property as well, which I think, again, another factor to clothing is washing clothing. And so if we can reduce the amount of washes we do, that's actually a massive environmental impact as well. So with the coffee, that means that you won't get that absorbs the odor, from sweating and things like that. So from a sports fabric, maybe if you wore it to the gym, you don't necessarily have to wash it like straight away. And with polyesters, there's a microfiber issue there. So the less washes, the better, because another massive issue is microfibers getting into our waterways, and washing machines at the moment don't really have a great filter system to stop that from happening.
I find that really interesting. So as you mentioned, I did talk to Jeff the other week from Impact Text, and they deal with clothing at the end of life. And I learnt last week that we have a huge clothing waste problem. Do you do anything to kind of help your clothes at the end of life, like to make sure they last longer or they break down better or anything like that?
Yeah, so again, when I'm looking into products or fabrics, when I'm to recommend to customers, like a big thing I look into is durability. And so again, one positive of using like organic cotton, for instance, is that it's actually more durable than normal cotton. So, and also like using, I guess, fabric weights and things like that, that's where, I guess, making sure the right product for the right purpose use is really important. And then also, we actually, work with Jeff, and there's, a number of other, we're across in Australia as well. So we deal with end-of-life solutions like what Jeff's doing. So we're really trying to, put the whole package together where it's, we find the different products or fabrics, get them clothes made, then decorate it for our clients, and then also at the end of life offer them a solution, to also, I guess, also include in the design of the product, like when you're putting embroidery on or screen printing or whatever you're doing, trying to design that in a way that's going to maximize the use of that product, and then at the end, hopefully, work with someone like Jeff and see well, how can we make this easier for you to recycle this at the end and collect it up for our clients. So I'm very much looking at try and look at the whole problem holistically, which is a massive problem, and also trying to explain that even to our clients. It's a very new thing, and a lot of people sort of still, I guess, don't understand, or maybe don't have the time or care about it. And so there's a big challenge for us as sort of an education piece to again make people care about this problem, because it is clothing, as you probably heard last week, is it's a pretty massive waste stream.
So I looked on your website and I couldn't see any prices for the clothing, but I imagine that all the things you do to make sure it's more sustainable than other options are probably not cheap. So how do you kind of compete with other brands and make sure that's not a problem?
Yeah, so this is, a massive challenge for us as a business. We generally work directly with sort of B2B clients, so we're going after corporates or consultants or construction companies, and we try and put do their uniform or their promo merch wear. So it's very dependent on quantities and what branding they want. So that's one of the reasons why we don't put the pricing on there. Is it more expensive? It depends on the product. For an organic cotton T-shirt, there's some really good offerings out there, which potentially are only $2 or $3 more per unit, which I don't think is that much. And recycled polyester now is almost is quite comparable, but that is the challenge when we're working with clients that have there's a lot of established players out there that basically just getting pretty cheap and nasty stuff made in, I guess, quite often third world countries that aren't sort of audited around health and safety or fair wages and things like that. So it is hard to compete against that. But we try and, I guess, bringing those issues to the forefront or have transparency around what we're doing and explain that to our clients. That's what we're trying to do. The sort of clients we go after are companies that have ESG policies, and there's more and more companies that are, they have procurement, I guess, policies that sort of say you need to look into like who your suppliers are. But I still think there's a lot we all can do, especially as businesses, to actually look into the space. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, so LUCKE mainly creates sustainable workwear like we've been talking about. What was the hardest thing about trying to create sustainable workwear when you first started?
Oh, the hardest thing. The hardest thing is creating a complete collection. So quite often, when a company does come to us or we approach a company, they're like, "Oh, we love your story. Let's talk." And they kind of want a one-stop shop. They just procurement, especially clothing. Like generally, the person in the company we're dealing with, it's a hard job. They're dealing with a budget from their boss, and then they're trying to keep all the staff happy. When clothing, as I've found, everyone has a style or opinion on clothing. Like you almost don't want to ask everyone what their opinion is. You just need to go because we're all individuals and everyone has a different that's kind of what makes us who we are. But the biggest challenge is a complete collection. So the technology or the innovation isn't there across all the range. We can get organic cotton polos and t-shirts, for instance, quite easily, but getting a recycled polyester waterproof jacket or a high-vis, that's some of that stuff isn't there yet. So yeah, that's definitely the biggest challenge for us, is completing a collection for a client and piecing it all together, because these suppliers are often all around the world. So yeah.
Have you seen any new technology that you're excited about?
Yes, there's the fabric technology is definitely the exciting one. Like personally, I quite like wearing hemp products. There's a lot of a cool story behind that and why we don't use more of it. And then there's like the blend, sort of like what you mentioned with like the recycled coffee. There's lots of different ones coming out. So the space is evolving, but yeah, it's also, unfortunately, a lot of the time those products cost more money, and it's getting like the established businesses to sort of be prepared to make that jump or pay a little bit more, maybe buy less products but better products and things like that.
So is the cost why companies don't... You said that there's a reason that people don't use more hemp for clothing, but it seems like, the perfect material, because I believe it grows super fast and it doesn't need chemicals. So what's the reason? Yeah,
there's a few ones there. Like it needs to be blended with, or generally needs to be blended with cotton, and so in this case, organic cotton is quite a good one. So I've got a few like hemp t-shirts which I really like. The feel of it is a bit more coarse, I would say. So everyone still loves the feel of what they wear, which is completely fair enough. But yeah, I think that's one issue. One issue is that it's sort of got, I know there's a few documentaries on this, but I feel like hemp has been associated with marijuana for, for a long time. A lot of people almost think it's the same thing. And, decades ago, it sort of got thrown in the same bucket. And that meant in the Western world, a lot of people stopped growing, and that's where like cotton became, a powerhouse that it is today. One of the few places that didn't get binned was China. And so China actually have a lot of hemp production and fabrics over there. So that's good, but I looked into doing a hemp t-shirt a few years ago, and one of the challenges is, dealing with China is, certification, around like fair trade, sort of working conditions and certification. And so you just got to be a little bit careful there. So it's just one of the challenges that I know in America they've started growing hemp again, and I think, as you say, it's a very interesting product, and I think we should do more and more of it.
I find that so interesting that, you can make clothes out of so many different cool things. But around, the practical side of it, how do you turn coffee grounds into clothes?
Well, the coffee, I'm not involved in the actual process of it, but,
yeah.
The polyester is, that's quite often bottles or something like that. So that's, shredded and then melted down and then turned into pellets and then, turned into a yarn. And with the coffee, they're using used coffee that's so they blend it into that fabric. I'm not actually sure the exact way that they do it, but I know it's used coffee grounds so that the pores, like the coffee's been extracted from it and it leaves like pores within the grounds like still in there, and that means that's why it can absorb the odor. So it's sort of like that's where the sort of that technology comes through. But there's another company called, I think it's Pangea, which is also doing some really interesting stuff around different fabrics made from all sorts of things. So that's definitely one to keep an eye out on.
That's really interesting. So also I noticed that LUCKE, it's spelled LUCKE. What's the reason for the E and not the Y?
Well, firstly, I didn't think it was going to be the easy, that wouldn't be such an easy name to trademark. But for me, in sailing, there's a lot of uncontrollables. You're dealing with nature, and you're kind of having to manage risk and those sorts of things. So I used to, when I was younger, think, oh man, so and so is very lucky they've done so well today, and then I realised all good people at business or life or sport, they kind of create their own luck. Yes, you can get lucky one-off, but if you have a good routine or you get really good at something, you actually start creating your own luck. And I really like that idea that that we are in control of somewhat in control of our own destiny. And if we put in good practices and if we're good people and do the right things, that they build on top of each other and you sort of create your own luck. So that was sort of where the luck came from, and being lucky. And I also think I'm very grateful for my upbringing and having been able to be close to nature and live in New Zealand and where I grew up. And so I've sort of there's a lot of gratitude there. And then the E on the end is two important things, sort of environment and empathy. And so I really think in the world today there's a big lacking of empathy and compassion, and I kind of really want to emphasize getting back to that. Why shouldn't we care about others?
So how's LUCKE going now compared to when you started?
Yeah, it's gone for a few iterations. Definitely when I started, I was more probably in the retail focused space. And now with my business partners, we've sort of very much focused onto sort of the corporate side of things. And that's more because there's some sort of sustainably focused retail products out there doing some quite cool things. You've got your Patagonias and things like that really have an amazing story. And I just looked in the sort of corporate space, and I just didn't really see anyone really focusing on that. And when you dig a little deeper into that space, there is a lot of clothing that is made for uniforms and merch. And you think about this sort of throwaway mentality, and it's you go to events and they would give out a hat or a T-shirt with a date on it. And it's quite often crap that you'd grab it and then you'd be like, oh, I don't want to keep this. And that stemmed even from when I was, doing these competitions, and it was standard that you'd go to a competition and you'd get your little entry pack and you'd have, a hat and a T-shirt. And I remember I'd literally, at the end of each competition, leave that bag in my hotel room because I just wouldn't want to take it with me. So we are starting to get a bit of traction in what we're doing now, which is, it's exciting. We're actually focusing a lot more in Australia at the moment because New Zealand, unfortunately, is, things are pretty tough out there at the moment. And, sustainable clothing isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to businesses' mind. So whereas Australia, there seems to be a little bit more of an appetite for it at the moment. The economy seems to be going a bit better than here. And we've got a few cool projects happening as well, working with Bonarong Wildlife Sanctuary and a charity in Australia called Clean Up Australia, which are, two pretty big organisations, which, it's really rewarding to work with companies that sort of actually they get what you're doing, and you can actually see some change happening.
Instead of using regular ink that most clothing brands use, you use a water-based ink, I think?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this touches on the printing side of our business. Now, say, you want to put your company logo on a T-shirt or a polo or a jacket, and there's sort of a number of options out there. So I think what you're referring to there is there's one which is screen printing, which is quite a common one, and they're now using water-based things in that space. And then there's also on sort of that sports sort of clothing called sublimation, which is another one where they sort of do a heat transfer and you can, press a whole lot of colours onto a garment. And that's a pretty clean process because, when you compare it to dyeing and, the paints on screen printing, for instance, like it's not necessarily the cleanest process. But again, that's where you are also, for instance, in screen printing between water-based and what's called platisol is like a plastic paint. The water-based might not last as long from a durability point of view, but the platisol, that garment, you might have vibrant printing for a lot longer. But also the water-based, for instance, can often be more expensive, but it might have a bit more of a, washed out look, which, that can look cool as well. So a big challenge for us, like it's not like one answer is the right answer, and that's probably me and my business partner's biggest problem is trying to break this down in a simple way for our clients, because quite often, there's so many different options and we're just really trying to simplify it for them. So what we try and do is, figure out their priorities and, where their budget is and give them the best result from a sustainability point, what we think of as a good sustainability outcome.
So if a business is wanting to become more sustainable and they don't know where to start, do you think sustainable clothing is a good way to start?
I definitely do. Obviously I'm biased, but I do find it interesting because I see a lot of cool businesses out there that are, B Corp is becoming a bigger thing. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, they must be, uniform must be something that, they'd be already into. And I look at it and I'm like, man, obviously I've got a pretty good eye now for different products and competitors. And I'm like, man, they're still just using, XXX. I'm surprised that they haven't, changed it up there. And so our argument to why it is important is, clothing is a premium branding spot. Like you can give it to your staff and it's like something like you're a walking billboard for your company, right? And so our biggest, slogan is sort of clothing that cares. So like, why would you not want, the very products that your staff are wearing to represent your brand? Like if you say that you're committed to sustainability or have ESG policies, why wouldn't you want, your staff to be wearing something that they can be, proud of, to say that, hey, no slave labor has been used in this product. This is a pretty environmentally friendly option. Oh, and by the way, it'll probably last longer. And, so I think, and a lot of studies are out there saying how, as staff members now, like sustainability or environmentalism is an important part of like team culture. So, that's definitely what we're pushing, like some of our clients now with our clothing that cares, we kind of push the idea that, wear your values on your sleeve. So we quite often they sew like a little tab on their sleeve that sort of says clothing that cares, to try and spark that conversation around, or how, why is this polo, better than a normal one? Because unfortunately, from first look, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to see if someone's wearing, say an organic cotton versus a cotton t-shirt. It's not until you look at the label or ask a little bit more that you find out the answer. So that's sort of, we're trying to stimulate that conversation, and by wearing, having like a tag or something on the outside to show that this product has had some thought go into it.
Is there anything else you do within LUCKE to be more sustainable, like manufacturing, anything like that?
Yeah, this again, I love the problem-solving side of things. So like, I basically look at our whole business and, I'm constantly trying to think like across the whole, way we do it. We've got the packaging that we send out, the shipping that you use. There's so many different angles to it. And it's hard sometimes because you look at everything and you spend a lot of time trying to come up with these better options, but it's not always the easiest way to explain or show that off to other people, it's like, and you're like, so part of you can be like, well, what's the point, because unless someone really, even just pitching someone a different fabric versus a normal fabric is a challenge at the moment, let alone explaining, hey, look, we actually offset this product. We, used, DHL Go Green shipping, which, we sea ship this versus air freighted this, there's all these little things we use, recycled card packaging versus, individually plastic, all these sorts of things which, take time to sort of sort out. But yeah, it's not always easy to be valued by other people like when they look into it.
So you just mentioned offsetting, and I believe you do that by planting trees with every order?
Yeah, so we're a part of 1% for the Planet, which was founded by Yvonne Chouinard, he's the founder of Patagonia. So basically 1% of our revenue we donate to, well, at least 1% of our revenue to, causes. Now, at the moment we use like a charity called One Tree Planted, which, is a relatively simple way of, it's not necessarily an offset, but it does offset the carbon, but it's also like a charity that we donate to. So there's a number of different options you can do out there. It's actually a space we're looking in to do more. I know you had someone from LUCKE on recently, and it was funny, I listened to that podcast, and I actually had a meeting with them like the week before. And so like our dream would be to calculate the footprint on every one of our products, and then, be able to say to our clients, hey, look, this is the carbon footprint, like, would you be prepared to offset? And, use someone like Carbon Click to sort of make that offset and say, hey, look, this is where the offset's being spent. And, that I just think that's a really nice story. And I think, moving forward, like every one of our products, like whether it's clothing, like in the world, like we should have, just like ingredients, a measurement of the carbon that's used for that, because otherwise I just can't see how, we're going to enact change unless like we're bringing that to the forefront.
I also think it's really interesting that you have a take back program where people can return their old clothes. What happens to the clothes after they're returned?
We, facilitate the take back. We use, people like Jeff, who you had on the other week, Impact Techs, and then in Australia there's, a similar company that's a partner with him. I'm constantly looking into the sort of different options there, but basically, we say to the companies we work with, hey, we can organise, a collection bin and get that sent off to, these recyclers, whether it's being recycled, sent to charity, or, in that space. As it's not a perfect solution yet, but I think that's a step in the right direction.
What do you think the biggest challenge for businesses trying to become more environmentally friendly is, and how can they overcome it?
Biggest challenge, I think it's just enacting change. Like for us as a small business, like, because we started with sustainability at our forefront, it's kind of, I guess, easier for us to go down that path. Whereas, humans are, unfortunately, I believe, inherently lazy, and we hate change. So we only change when we absolutely have to, but then we're actually really good at it. So I think the challenge is to get to that point where where people are prepared to take that jump. And that's a question that I'm, asking in all parts of our life at the moment with, politics and sustainability. Like, how do we create that change? So I don't have the golden answer for it, but I guess it goes back to picking one thing and starting there, and then maybe that gets people thinking along those lines, and then you're like, well, if you're doing this here, then you start thinking about, another thing that you could change to optimize it, and it becomes almost a game in a way. I think humans love problem solving. A lot of us do anyway. So if we can just channel people in that direction, I think that will make a huge difference. And then, once we do decide to do something, I think we're very adaptable. I mean, that's how we've got this far with humanity, I think.
What's your biggest dream for LUCKE in the future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the more successful we get, the more bigger projects we can take on. Like, I see a lot of problems in this industry, and at the moment, because we're a small player, we don't necessarily have the capital behind us to sort of really take the jump on some things. So, if we got bigger, it would enable us to sort of, go directly to some factories or innovate more. Whereas at the moment, I'm kind of stuck, finding different suppliers that have done some things that tick the boxes. But yeah, I've definitely got some ideas that I would love to take on. But at this stage, we've got to be profitable first,
What do you want your legacy to be for future generations?
The big thing for me is getting back to caring. And I don't know whether that's changed, but if you look at the most successful like even like longevity studies and all those sorts of things. It's the communities that are like tight and look after each other, and they're the ones that last the longest. And so like I just want humans to care about each other again, whereas I think it's a constant battle where we kind of go, when things get tough, we kind of go insular and like just protect our own, whereas like I think if we can why not go the other way, like why not, like why is it a bad thing to care about others? I really struggle with that. And so that would be the big thing, just to get people to make the effort to care more.
Well, it's been so interesting talking to you today and learning more about your company, LUCKE. And yeah, I think it's really cool what you're doing. How can listeners find out more about LUCKE?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's definitely it's the first podcast I've done before, so obviously a little nervous. But yeah, to get hold of us, the easiest way would just be to search, our website is luckyapparel.com, and also we're on LinkedIn and Instagram. Otherwise, reach out direct or through the usual channels.
Cool, well, thank you so much for coming.
Cool.
I'd also like to thank everyone listening. That was Garth Ellingham from LUCKE, and I'm Lilah McDonald.
At Office Mags Business Accounts, pay less. Sign up at officemags.co.nz/pay less. Let's get it done. T's and C's apply.
A special thanks to sponsors of this podcast, Office Max, whose vision is to empower sustainable and successful workplaces. Learn more about how they can help your business at officemax.co.nz. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned to nzbusiness.co.nz for more details on upcoming episodes and bonus podcast material. Let's make our world more sustainable, one story at a time. See you soon!